Good evening. I'm Gillian Parsons. I'm the Programming and Engagement Officer for Fife Cultural Trust. So Pecha, Kucha, Dunfermline is organised as part of the Creating Fife programme. So Creating Fife comes under the banner of Fife Cultural Trust and supports the creative and cultural sector by providing promotional opportunities, training, funding advice, an awards scheme and networking opportunities such as this. The Creative Fife Directory currently represents 625 creative and cultural industries. Tonight's event has been curated on behalf of the Blueprint Dunfermline Festival. And Blueprint Dunfermline aims to celebrate the architecture and built environment of Dunfermline and West Fife. The project has been delivered by a local consortium led by online culture magazine Avocado Suite. So I'm now going to hand you over to Jane Livingston and Michelle McWilliams from Avocado Suite, and they're going to tell you more about Blueprint Dunfermline, and they're going to introduce tonight's presenters. Jane and Michelle. Michelle McWilliams. We're from Avocado Suite, which is a local online culture magazine. Some of you might have seen. We try and capture all that's best and interesting about Fife and Dunfermline in particular. Avocado Suite is one of the local groups behind Blueprint Dunfermline. That's am I speaking into the microphone or not? It wasn't very interesting.
You need to work that out.
Hello? Can you hear me? I'll go back to the beginning. I'm Jane, this is Michelle from Avocado Suite, which is a local culture magazine, some of you may know. We try and capture all that's interesting and different and special about West Fife and Dunfermline in particular. We're one of the groups behind Blueprint Dunfermline, which is a new initiative just launched last month with this beautiful exhibition here by Chalk of the modern plasterwork. And as Gillian said, it aims to celebrate the architecture and built environment of West Fife, which is actually incredibly diverse. I think Dunfermline must probably have a building from every architectural period there's ever been. So that could be everything from historically important buildings like Dunfermline Abbey, socially interesting things like Dollytown and Rosyth, to the things that you can see from the number 5 bus. Surprisingly interesting things you can see on your way to Avocado. So it's, like I say, it's a group, it's run on a voluntary basis. We've planned a whole series of interesting events to run until the middle of 2017, many of them low cost or no cost. And if anyone has any suggestions for other things they would like to see within that programme, we'd love to hear about it. There is a website, Blueprint Dunfermline, which details everything we're planning. There's a beautiful hand-illustrated map, there's a drop-in architecture clinic, there are tours of buildings, talks, all sorts of activities, lighting installations, projections onto city centre buildings, lots of things which I hope you'll enjoy as we get round to them. But Pecha Kucha is the second event. I think there's lots of interesting topics to be covered this evening, so I'll hand over to Michelle to introduce the speakers.
Hi there, I just also want to mention thanks for the support for the Strategic Events Fund at Fife Council, plus the Carnegie Trust as well. So, on to our first speaker, who is David McKee-Fraser, who describes himself as a full-time grandfather, but is also a retired doctor, a Carnegie trustee, and an elder at Dunfermline Abbey. And that leads us on to what he's actually going to talk about, which is the stained glass at Dunfermline Abbey. Okay, David.
This is a picture painted by Joseph Noel Peyton. He was born in Moores Alley, just across the back here. The picture was bequeathed to Carnegie Dunfermline Trust, and it now hangs in the city chambers. It shows the pious Margaret it's 20 seconds up already. Noel Paton also designed 3 stained glass windows for Dunfermline Abbey. This is the Scottish Patriots window in the west. And again you have Margaret and Malcolm in the middle, flanked by Robert Bruce and William Wallace. This was paid for by Andrew Carnegie, this window. The second window is entitled, it's a religious theme rather than a secular theme, and it's entitled The Agony in the Garden, and you can see it's purely religious. You've got Christ with the angel and the sleeping disciples, while in the background Judas is coming with the priests. The east window in Dunfermline Abbey was put out to tender, and they produced a secular theme here, which was the kings and queens buried in Dunfermline Abbey, but this was rejected because it was secular and not religious enough. But you can see a number of kings there. This window here now, the black and white design, was by Noel Paton, and you can see the coloured version there. Now that was some years later, and Noel Paton himself did black and white drawings which were purchased and are now in the museum. The lower lights show the Last Supper, and on the lower lights there are a number of things to notice, particularly the rather moody and depressed Judas Iscariot, but there are 2 people with their hands clasped. These are thought to be the McLaren brothers who donated the window. This is the upper lights, which shows the resurrection. And the strange thing about this is that one angel is pointing up saying he's not here, and the other one is pointing down saying, for he is risen. So we're not quite sure why that came about in that way, or whether the panels got mixed up. The upper lights show a bit of symbolism, with the centre being Christ and surrounded by 12 disciples. Then there is Alpha and Omega here. There are grapes here. Grapes usually means vines, and that usually means life. But we can't work out what the other flowers are. Andrew Carnegie also donated this window to Dunfermline Abbey, but again it was rejected. It was too secular. And this is by Lewis Comfort Tiffany. It's a Tiffany window, probably now valued at £250,000, and it's in Carnegie Trust offices. But the Heritors in Dunfermline Abbey decided it was too secular. So instead, Carnegie commissioned Douglas Strachan to produce this window, which was reckoned to be more religious and more in keeping. There are again vines wrapped around this, which again means life, and the chap there is sitting thinking. Douglas Strachan, the artist, designed another window in Dunfermline Abbey, and because of my connections there, I was sent this print of the original design by Douglas Strachan. It's not in terribly good condition, but this is in the Edinburgh College of Art, resulting in this window by Douglas Strachan, installed in fact by his brother Alexander Strachan, which is the Margaret window and is in the south part of the Abbey. It is probably about 80 years old. In the lower lights here show the wedding of Malcolm and Margaret, and there are ladies and knights on either side there, and you can see the white doves, which are all reckoned to be part of Margaret's peace theme. She was somebody who wanted to have a quiet, tranquil life. This is her teaching her children to give alms to the poor. And Malcolm is seen here with one of the sons looking on, but one of the interesting things here is that there's a bishop walking in with a stonemason with designs for Dunfermline Abbey. The upper lights are all symbolic. This is supposed to represent the church, the central ship, but the Margaret shield is here, the cross and martlets, and the Scottish shield to show that she was then Queen of Scotland, her husband was the king. A slightly more modern window here is designed by Wilson of Edinburgh, is showing, the theme here is St. Paul. It shows Paul preaching to people in Athens. This is Paul and his Damascus conversion. And here you've missed it now, but that was Paul. The last window I'm going to talk about is in fact the Bruce window, which is the most modern one. It was put in 1974, and it was to commemorate the 700th anniversary of the birth of King Robert the Bruce. The lower lights show Robert the Bruce in the middle, flanked by two on either side of Douglas. I can't even read that one, but there's the Lord of the Isles and the Stuart here. The important thing about this one is that the designer managed to get a spider into the window. There was a bit of controversy about this window when it first went in, but we managed to appease the Earl of Elgin and have it changed. Now, this is the upper lights with Christ flanked by the 4 Scottish saints, and in the tracery we have the Lamb of God, and it's surrounded by symbols of all 12 of the apostles. The ones you can see very clearly here are the keys of St. Peter, and I think this is the fish. You can probably see it clearly, it's a fisherman. So that's fish.
Thanks, David. The Pecha Kucha format's quite fast, isn't it? Our next speaker is Olga Krasanova, who's a visual artist and printmaker originally from Siberia, and in fact she was telling us earlier that she went back in January, and she wasn't quite sure where she went in January because it was minus 30. But she came to the UK 10 years ago, and has made Dunfermline her home. She graduated from Central St Martin's in July 2011. Okay, Olga.
Hello, so my name is Olga and I'm a full-time artist and printmaker based here in Dunfermline. I am obsessed with the mark making and printing, and recently I have been trying to push my boundaries in some way and making more marks. So living and commuting in Dunfermline, I couldn't help but notice the pattern of architecture of the town. Specifically, I got interested in the cuts of the actual bricks of the buildings. Dunfermline has got a beautiful heritage that goes back in the many centuries, and I love how this heritage is well preserved. Of course, there is a great pressure from the erosion, climate, pollution, aging or vandalizing, but the restoration guys seem to be doing a pretty good job in preserving the origin patterns and stonework. Not quite successful picture though. They're not just physical changes that architecture is going through, also the concept of the buildings varies through time because of the social human impact. Even though stone is a solid material, the purpose of architecture lies in its usage. Like here, for example, church was converted in a house. Architecture also depends on its environment. Every building can tell a wonderful story behind it, such as Abbey Church from possibly 1070-ish, or Alhambra Theatre from 1920s building can tell you a story. And there are plenty of buildings that are no longer serve their original purpose. For example, Abba House used to be an actual Abba House, but it went through many changes. And long story short, the last use was a gallery, a cafe, and a nice garden, and who knows what's going to be next. Or take this building, for example. It used to be a fire station, and now it's a fire station creative, a hub of creativity, gallery, studios and cafe. Usually the main structure of the buildings, as a rule, is well preserved, regardless the usage. And that renovation of the building is fantastic, as it gives a new life to the community. So I got a bit involved with the pattern that I started sketching cuts and marks of the bricks. as you do, because I believe there is so much history in those little details. It's actually a sort of similar pattern when I do my own artwork, some sort of approach, I guess. I wasn't sure where I was going with it just yet, but I got a bit obsessed with the research and doodling. Eventually, I started making a pattern of all those lines, cuts and curves. I also wanted to make it a little bit more graphical, but not too far from what it is. Meanwhile, I successfully applied for a grant to Fife Contemporary Art and Crafts to support my project. So now I had to make a product out of what I have accumulated so far. So bearing in mind the history, environment and architectural details and a pattern of bricks, I decided to make windsocks. Sort of Japanese style, but not quite, a bit more greyish, as Dunfermline is. And so, well, because to me, windsocks symbolize a change. Oh my God, such a long 20 seconds. So since it shows direction or depends on direction or where the wind blows. Typically, windsocks used to indicate direction or wind speed and used at the airports or anywhere there's gas leakage or whatever. And this is how I made mine. So I bought an outdoor camping fabric and fabric spray paints. I did stencils based on my sketches and applied them on the fabric. I've added some doodles using permanent markers and at last sewed them all together. When my windsocks got dry, I took them to the seaside to test. So the weather was fantastic, so that was a great excuse to come out from my studio as well. And there was plenty of wind, and so everything worked just fine. I was super happy. And my first installation was held at the Fresh Air Festival 2016 at the public park. On the day, all was ready, except I had a tiny problem. On that particular day, there was no wind. So the event went nicely, but not quite as I expected, or wanted to be, for me, personally. So the windsocks stayed at the park for about a month, and only 2 went missing. I must have really attached them very well. So, which I guess is not too bad when I left my bike. Unattended, it was gone in 2 hours, really. So it's good, no problem behaved. Well, now they installed outside in the supposedly very windy area. It was really windy yesterday, at the fire station, Creative. And it might work better here, I think, perhaps, because it's more appropriate for an art environment as well. The journey of my windsocks went through some different circumstances, but whenever they can't really work without an appropriate wind. As well as architecture. So it can be on its own. I need to wait. So, because architecture needs users to keep going, to tell a new story. Because, as you know, even more permanent structures are subject to the winds of change. And to conclude with my art project, I wanted to merge my first impression of the town, history, local people, environment, and architecture. Because Dunfermline has got an impressive background. Thank you.
Thanks, Olga. I understand that Ian Moyer, who manages the gallery, was actually up a huge ladder hanging the windsocks up yesterday. Sorry. Our next speaker is Neil Beswick, who's Director of Projects with Stirling Developments, and it's a Dunfermline-based master planning and development company. He lives in Dunfermline, and he's going to talk about the proposals for development to the west of Dunfermline. Okay, thank you.
Hi. My name's Beswick. I'm an architect and Director of Projects at Stirling Developments. We're a Dunfermline-based company who have a couple of big projects. The one that's most pertinent to you guys would be Broom Hall, which is the southwest expansion of Dunfermline, which we're currently working away frantically on. Like I say, we're a small company. This shows how much we get involved in all parts of our development. From dealing with infrastructure delivery, we manage all the sort of interstitial spaces between the housing areas that we sell off to various house builders, but also planting fruit trees in people's gardens and the like. This is our other big project, which we've been working on since around 2004, which is Calderwood in West Lothian. It's a similar size project to Broom Hall, with around 2,000 homes, and surrounded by a lovely country park. We've got first phase, which is around 280 homes. The aerial photo there shows the similar sort of scale to Broom Hall, and this is some of the first phase houses that we've spent quite a bit of time putting in slightly different streets from the norm, making nice quality places that people would like to live in. And these are greenways, pedestrian connections that we put in and plant up ourselves, and local park which we've just put in to great success. I got caught out by my boss trying out one of the swings when someone posted it to Facebook just recently. Back to Broom Hall, I think what's quite nice to do is to look at the history of a place before you start layering it up with new development. You can see the tight streets from 1893, how dense historic patterns of development were, and how closely integrated large employment areas were with the linen mills. This is quite an interesting plan from 1921, which was developed and never really implemented. The wars came along and kind of knocked it on the head. But you can see Rosyth has effectively been built out broadly along the lines of this plan. Broom Hall was shown there, which never actually happened. And again, fantastic quality place. We all know Dunfermline itself is a great place, but you've got obviously the Abbey, you've got fantastic green space right in the centre of town. Our development's just down here to the south. This is all Elgin Industrial Estate at the moment. But you see the quality of the place, how tight the development is. One of the things we've noticed latterly is that Dunfermline has effectively expanded out to the east. Obviously logistically towards the M90, good connections. Broom Hall has the potential to rebalance the town closer to the city centre, which is the wee yellow dot there. This is the local plan from 2012, which we're sort of working in line with as we develop up proposals for the site, which is this area down here. And it shows how Fife Council are effectively looking at connecting up all the new development with various new roads and the like, and the green belt boundary to Crossford. Like I say, we've been working on the project since 2004, but things have sort of ramped up this year. We're aiming towards a December submission date for our outline planning for the site. This is a design workshop that we ran in July, a 2-day workshop with invited designers and residents from the site to generate ideas and chew over our current proposals. This is an aerial photo. We got commissioned some drone photography recently, so these are some of the latest photos we've got of the site. This is Elgin Industrial Estate looking north. You can see the Abbey up in the centre of the picture there, and really our site is effectively everything to the south of this, past the gas governors. This is an image right in the centre of the site. We've got a number of different buildings, farm buildings. This is Webster Galet farmhouse and steadings. We'll look to some parts like this aren't actually part of our plan, but other parts will integrate and potentially do something like this, repurpose old buildings and use them for sort of community hubs and the like. This is looking south east down Grange Road. A lot of people know that as a rat run, quick way out from the town. Horrendous road in terms of geometry. We'll look to do new things to slow traffic and effectively improve that road. But there's also a railway bridge going to have to be coming across here and connecting up to Queensferry Road. This is another view looking south, showing the site's connections up into town. Obviously we've got things to address with the gas works and the like, but how we can physically connect our new development into the town, and likewise to other parts down to Rosyth and south. It's a cracking site looking south over the bridges, and obviously with the new bridge crossing coming in, there's potentially a new gateway into Dunfermline can be created from the south of the site, pulling people up in. So this is what we're up to at the moment. This is our master plan at a sort of zoomed out scale, showing the two train stations. You've got Rosyth at the bottom, you've got the red dot would be the Abbey. We've made quite a move to orientate our development to have retained views up to the town of the Abbey. So our main new thoroughfare that runs up through the centre of the development is effectively on axis with the Abbey. We've got a new primary school in the centre, although we're looking at potential for 2 given the scale of the development. We also have the 2 railway crossings, one for the Western Distributor Road, which will run up the side of Grange Cole Road, and one that crosses over to Queensferry Road there. And that again is just a rough aerial sort of sketch to show how the development will sit. Each of these sort of shaded white pale parcels is effectively mixed use development, so we're not sure where exactly housing will go, where employment will go, but we've got circa 70 hectares of employment to fit on the site, so it's quite an interesting task to deal with. And this was from our recent public consultation which we had down at the Glen Pavilion, showing various sort of aspirations for the site, a few images of our Calderwood development, and then in terms of things like the community farm, as I mentioned, repurposing old steadings and the like, so that was quick.
Thanks, Neil. We're very grateful to our next speaker who prepared his presentation with about 2 hours notice as we had a last minute cancellation. So Graham Webster is going to speak next, and he's Fife Council's Festivals Development Officer and Coordinator of Festivals in Fife, which aims to raise the number of national and international visitors come to Fife to attend quality events. He's going to talk about the Rosyth Garden City and other subjects. So, Graham?
Hi, so I'm Graham Webster from the Cultural Partnerships and Event Strategy team at Fife Council. And in this presentation, we'll have a quick look at Fife's nominations for the RIAS Top 100 Buildings in Scotland, focus a bit on Rosyth Garden City and the kind of ideals that came about with that, and look at some other initiatives as part of Scotland's Year of Innovation, Architecture and Design. So one thing I'm really inspired by is the idea of you dig where you stand, and I have to say that I'm not a planner, I'm not an architect. I studied folklore and then museum studies, so I've come at this from a kind of different approach. And Sven said, dig where you stand in the 1970s, to sort of say, well, look where you've come from first before you explore other cultures, you know, see what's on home turf. So a few months ago I had to clear out my grand's house, and we found all these fantastic photos. My grandparents and my grand's brother took all these great photos around Fife. We've got this one here from the opening of the Rothes Colliery, Queen donned up there, which is quite fun too. So we'll have a quick look at the RIAS Top 100 and then go on to look at the Garden City ideal. The Royal Incorporation of Architects of Scotland nominated 100 buildings from across Scotland which have shaped and influenced design practice from the length and breadth of the country. And you'll be able to see this exhibition at the Townhouse until Tuesday. So this was built in 1937, but it wasn't finished until 1956 by David Carr and William Frederick Howard. It was by a competition. It's quite Scandinavian influenced. Floors have been sadly replaced in the past few years, but they're really beautiful. This is St Paul's RC in Glenrothes, and it was one of the first Roman Catholic churches to be built after the Second World War by Gillespie, Kidd and Coya, who then went on to build St Peter's Seminary in Cardross, which just got transformed by the White Show as part of Year 2. This one is, sorry, excuse me for going my nose, Dutch Village in Craigton Park, which was built in 1920 to complement the 2 boating lakes that were already there by Baron Dr. James Younger, who was a sort of brilliant entrepreneur. This is Andrew Melville Hall, which is one of the last nominations, and it was built in 1968. It was meant to be part of a wider scheme by Andrew Stirling of the famous Stirling Architect Prize. I think there were meant to be about 4 buildings. It was quite controversial for its time. So, Rosyth. It started off kind of as a tin town in Hilltown of Rosyth, where all the big developments are going on just now, because the dockyards wanted to house families who were brought in to the new Rosyth development in the dockyards, which was started in 1909. Sorry, around 1,000 families were housed there. But at the same time, further down in England, this man, Ebenezer Howard, with the great moustache here, came up with the Garden City concept in his famous piece, Tomorrow, A Peaceful Path to Real Reform. And in that, he describes the 3 magnets. The 3 magnets, for those of you back, are town, country, and town-country. It's all about how people are drawn, to various aspects of social living. So I'll just read you a bit from it, because it's really great. So he says, the country magnet declares herself to be the source of all beauty and wealth, but the town magnet mockingly reminds her that she is very dull for lack of society and very sparking for her gifts of lack of capital. Sparing, sorry, not sparking. There are in the country beautiful vistas, lordy parks, violet-scented woods, fresh air, sounds of rippling water, but too often one sees the threatening words, trespassers will be prosecuted. So he really wanted to create this concept of town and country and put them together. And in Scotland, we had Patrick Geddes working away in Edinburgh, who was trying to rehouse people into Edinburgh's slums in the Old Town, because there was all this development going on into Bruntsfield, into other, new areas of Edinburgh, and he was trying to attract aristocrats, people with a bit of money, people from society back into the city centre. So, Rosyth was built. We'll get to Rosyth just now. And the Scottish National Housing Company was formed to build the entire city. But because they needed to build it quite quickly, they kind of skipped all planning legislation, so they just passed all of the plans amazingly well, which we wouldn't think of nowadays, and there's a whole system to do that nowadays. The first people moved to Rosyth in 1916. It was built by Raymond Unwin supported it, who'd worked on the Garden City projects down south. Now, this is just another point. I'd say that Rosyth, despite being the Garden City, could technically be described as Scotland's first new town. Now, if you think about it, Glenrothes is Scotland's second new town, but Rosyth had all of the kind of early social aspects. So there was all of this green space that would go outside. Sorry, I'm really behind on my slides, so I'm going to catch up for right now. This is one of the other nominations I think should be on the Rias Top 100. That's the Maggie's Centre in Fife by Dame Zaha Hadid. It's the first capital project by Zaha Hadid's firm in Scotland. It sort of signifies a lump of coal, and it shows how far we've come. It's a great building. If you want to learn more about our kind of architecture, the team at Welcome to Fife have just developed this website, www.welcometofife.com/Fife architecture, and it details 50 buildings around Fife with beautiful illustrations by Will Freeburn, with a bit of background on them too. We've also got Doors Open Day West Fife happening on Sunday the 18th of September, organised by the fabulous Teresa Hughes at Fife Council, who's amazing. She's a planner by day, she's a superwoman by night. So check out fifedirect.org.uk/Doors Open Days for the full programme. We've got some great venues opening, including the one in Couris as well, the Bennett House, which was one of the first properties acquired by the National Trust for Scotland. So you can learn a bit about the progress of that too. So thank you very much for listening, and check out Festival.
Welcome back, everyone. We're going to move on to the second half of the Machu Picchu, as it was called earlier. Our next speaker is Tim Fitzpatrick, who runs a community-based arts project called The Red Field, based in Anstruther. He's created a lot of work in many public spaces, and Redfield is actually part of the Blueprint Consortium. His recent collaborators include Michael Nyman, Goldie, and Charles Jenks. And he's going to talk about proposals for a lighting installation in Dunfermline and the closes and pins of the town. Okay, Tim?
Thanks very much. We're just going to stand and stare at this because all of this has been said. So basically that's the Redfields, that's my community arts company, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but it's that word over there on the far side that I'd like to talk about tonight, which is the idea. The word actually describes and is the title for a new community arts project in Dunfermline. So, as was mentioned, Redfield is based in Anstruther, but we could say born in Dunfermline. These were our first projects 6 years ago in the Abbey. So the Pilgrim was the first project, and we followed that up with Another Land. When I thought about this presentation tonight, and the idea is that this new project, Align, is for an historic close, which I'll tell you about. And I was astounded to discover how many historic closes I seem to have created art projects for. So Mary King's Close, that was Flesh Market Close. Advocates Close in Edinburgh, that was part of World Heritage Day, celebrating World Heritage Day, I think in 2011. And Clash Close was the Cooper Arts Festival, and I think I created that I know I created it, but it was just before the Redfield was formed. So I originally trained in film and photography, and light is a big part of what I do. It's not always, doesn't always involve light, and sometimes the lighting is very temporary, as in this piece, which is just movement created for the camera, and this is a more permanent piece. And this brings us right up to date, because this is Redfield last year. This was part of International Year of Light in collaboration with the University of St Andrews, and I worked really closely with an astronomer, and I really got into these things here, which you'll see in a minute. These are emission lines, or emission spectrum, or emission spectra, and that's oxygen. I'd love to tell you all about this, but I've only got 20 seconds. But basically, all the elements will give off an emission spectra when heated, when they give off light. So there are 96 naturally occurring elements, 92, and here's 30 of them. And I just placed them in this order. This kind of felt right to me. There's hydrogen over there, that's arsenic. So I'm getting to know them, and I played around with them a bit, so I took a bag of pencils around the coast. And I love the idea that you can actually photograph oxygen. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of oxygen here, but that's oxygen there, and that's cadmium over on the top right. So that was being a bit more playful with the idea. So this is something that I'm developing and I'm still working on. So the Shine project with the university finished, but this is where I'm taking it now. So you'll all recognise the sun, but the picture on the right is the same image, basically. I mean, I know it's not, but they are both the sun. And what this is, these are absorption lines, and so that's kind of the inverse of emission lines. So I want to bring the sun into this close, Free School Close, in Dunfermline. It's amazingly long, it's amazingly tall, it's amazingly narrow, and I want to use the perspective of walking down that close to create a sun at the end there. I just looked at this recently. This is George Roos, and he's a photographer, but he became this installation artist where his camera becomes the point of view, so the camera informs the object, if you like. So they're the same thing, but obviously from changing perspective. And so it's perspective that concerns me. And so the idea I have for Free School Close, but there are a number of ideas, is an eclipse. So excuse my really bad photoshopping. I'm rubbish at photoshopping, but there's no other way, basically. And so, for example, these ought to be really thin, beautiful thin wires. And so, I mean, this person resolutely stands here, but it's as if we're walking down the close. And we come to our point of alignment. So this idea is all about the art needs the viewer. The eclipse doesn't happen without the viewer. And the other thing is, if you look at the element, sometimes that's called the ring of fire. So if that's our middle element, if that's the moon, in an eclipse, the moon is sometimes close to the Earth and sometimes it's quite far away, and those two distances are quite a lot. Off the top of my head, I think it's 225,000 against 250 or something like that. No, there's missing noughts there. But anyway, the relationship stays the same. That relationship is correct. So that's the moon quite near, because it's completely blocking the sun. So here's another artist that I'm interested in his work, James Turrell. And again, it's about manipulating the viewer's relationship with a space. And I think he calls it, there are lots of these that the artist has made. And I think he calls these skyscapes. And so finally, one more artist, Oliver Eliasson, and this work, The Weather Project, which is in the Turbine Hall of the Tate Modern. This was 2003. And there were lots of interesting things about this piece, but for example, I know that the artist used incredibly narrow frequency of light for the sun, which gives that lovely effect. This one, I thought there was going to be another slide here. This is free to all close again, obviously, but I've got something happening on the ground, and I like the idea that there might be a lighting effect that is also happening at ground level, so that you can anticipate that you're moving into the space that's going to create that event, so you're a participant. And I just thought I'd throw these two in, because there's not just one historic close in Dunfermline, there are many. And I don't propose that we create eclipses in all of them, but that it's the word align that I'm interested in, aligning, yes, different elements. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tim. Our next speaker is Fiona Fisher, who's a conservation officer for Fife Council. She was a landscape architect from 1983 to 2009, and she's going to talk about conservation projects in the Dunfermline area.
Hi there, this is a view by William Sleitzer from 1693 of Dunfermline, and I'm mainly here to talk about the Dunfermline Conservation Area and its built heritage. Built heritage being streetscape, buildings, bridges, other structures, the fabric, the nuts and bolts that make up our urban landscape. Listed buildings are foremost amongst them. These are categorised by Historic Environment Scotland, A for national and international, B for regional, and C for local importance or significance. That's Pittencrieff House, of course, which is category A. There are also in Fife 48 conservation areas. A conservation area is a historic place, the character and appearance of which it is desirable to protect and enhance. Couros is obviously one of them, which is pictured, and also we have got a number of different conservation areas which were medieval in origin, including St Andrews, Cooper, Falkland, pretty villages of the East Neuk, and of course the more prosaic Rosyth Garden suburb, or maybe not so prosaic, as we heard earlier. But obviously Dunfermline, being the late medieval capital of Scotland, is an important conservation area within Fife Council area. Its character is distinctive but not static, and I hope we can align with that following Tim's interesting presentation. And there are a number of artworks which have already been installed and a number of interventions and alterations. It keeps moving on. Fife Council manages alterations to the historic environment through the planning process. If you live in the conservation area, you don't get to make changes without having to apply for planning consent. So even some repairs do need planning consent. But this is there to protect the heritage so that we have got a special place to pass on to the next generation. There's a range of advice which helps people to navigate their way through, allegedly, maybe not that greatly, both by Historic Environment Scotland and by Fife Council, and both are available on the website. And it's really just about trying to understand what's important and respecting it, which a lot of you artistic people, I'm sure, do intuitively. It's not to say you can't change things in the conservation area. You can, and there's always a place for good design, but just that you have to think more carefully about it. And there is specific advice about this from Historic Environment Scotland in their Managing Change in the Historic Environment series, which is on the website. And things like Malcolm Fraser's poetry library in Edinburgh, which, although it's very uncompromising and modern, it does relate to the crags behind and to the very high, slightly top-heavy buildings in the Canongate. Within Dunfermline Conservation Area, we've touched on the medieval town and the fact that the origins go back to King Malcolm II, also known as Malcolm Canmore, and Queen Margaret, both of whom are buried in the Abbey. So we're going around in circles talking about the Abbey and Venels and Closes and so on. This is the conservation area, and the little dots are all the listed buildings. Not to say that the unlisted buildings are not important, traditional buildings, and particularly thinking about what Olga was looking at in her presentation, the textures of the building, the patina of age, the layering of time is all very important. Within the Abbey, we know that there are 7 kings buried there, I think. I'm not going to try and list them all, I'll probably get it wrong. But there's this very deep sense of history from having the Abbey. And I think it was mentioned by a previous presenter that we've got a variety of different architectures, a variety of different times. But there's also unity within the town, within the materials that have been used that are so local. Some of this is captured in the Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan, which is something that the council produce, and it aims to be a snapshot of the conservation area and a management tool to help identify what is special about the conservation area, what is distinctive about it, what should be protected, all the little sort of twiddly bits and buildings that you probably don't see unless you look up, and up Venels and down areas of flooring that are interesting as well. And also there are some issues in the conservation as well, and some threats to the conservation area. One of the principal threats being alterations that are inappropriate. We've all seen the sort of unstoppable tide of PVC windows, which are really not appropriate in a conservation area, even on a modern building. Another issue is buildings at risk, vacant buildings. This is a Category B listed building, the Pilmuir Works and St Margaret's Works, and it's been vacant for I don't know how long, and it's in a very serious and some would say dangerous condition. There is a buildings at risk register held by Historic Environment Scotland, and if you know any developers, are there developers here? I think there might be. It's a good way to find somewhere that you might be able to pick up for as little as £1 if you've got an idea and a good funding mechanism to go on. This Cannon Street, just put that in to show that there are some areas in Dunfermline, and really quite a lot of areas in Dunfermline, where the windows are still intact. The conservation area is really in good condition, and I think the High Street is still interesting. There are sometimes shop fronts that are not exactly in keeping, but I think you've got to kind of live with the times. There are modern listings, obviously, like this building. Anything that's 50 years and older can be listed. So more increasingly, some of these more recent buildings are coming in nowadays, and they are different, but they are important. I think the Art Deco period in particular is well received, and I think you have to remember the conservation is not just about protection of the built environment, but about management and enhancement. There are opportunities for the community to get involved and for other interventions, artistic and otherwise. But above all, I would recommend that you enjoy the special character, architecture and history of Dunfermline Conservation Area.
Thanks, Fiona. Our next speaker combines being a hairdresser with being an artist. So in fact, he rushed up here having done a cut and blow dry. Alan Grieve runs Workspace Dunfermline with his friends Emma and James. And so he divides his time between cutting hair and arts projects. He's done arts projects for the National Theatre of Scotland, Dundee University, and NHS Fife and Forth Valley. Okay, thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me okay? Yep, good. This is Workspace Dunfermline. We cut hair and make art, Michelle already said. That's a face swap, and that's funny. I like that a lot. We use that as an advertising material online, and that puts quite a lot of people off, which is good. We combine the two. We've got a stable hairdressing staff, and I make art and use the space. This is our new shop. It's up in a place called Wellwood, in the outskirts of town. I don't know if anyone knows that. When we first opened, we got involved in the gala day. We let all the kids draw in the windows, and the police drew in the windows as well, which was just great. I loved it. Them graffiti in our shop. And these are all snippets from Instagram. Wellwood Village. This is the flats in Wellwood. I'm just talking basically about places and objects and people and things I like in Dunfermline. This is Johnny and his son Harrison. He runs Radio Wellwood from his balcony on sunny days. He DJ'd our last party. I love Johnny. He's got a dog called Duke, he's a nightmare. Right, graffiti, that's really good. My friend James, my colleague, sent me that for a house party in the Meaghan. That's true, that's a telly. I'm so happy with that, that's really good. So you can see, I like having fun. We have a very playful environment, and I think it's really healthy, and we enjoy ourselves. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some places in Dunfermline. That's the skate park in Abbeyview. That was all part of the regeneration of Abbeyview, which some people may know. I'm from Abbeyview originally, so it's a really interesting thing to be. I was doing the Abbeyview Artists in residence for a couple of years, so I was down there quite a lot. As my son when he was wee. That's a banner I made for their festival. Another skate park in the town behind Carnegie Hall, just looking out for the wee tiny details, finding things. A skater's done the Abbey. I quite liked that. I thought that was fun. I thought they just usually wrote profanities and drew things. You know what I mean. So I'm always on the lookout for stuff. The Palace Ruins. How I know the Palace Ruins was a rites of passage, walking along the parapet as a young kid, because the big guys tell you to do it. That's my engagement with the Palace Ruins, and I kind of like that. It's stuck with me for a long time, so I did a little doodle of it, and I wrote Danger. Abbott House, quite a few times Abbott House has been spoken about tonight. I like the Alistair Gray mural up the stairs. I think that's amazing. It's such a shame it's shut, and I always like the volunteers who never gave you the right role, ever. Is that a Scotland, son? No, it's a big role, thanks. So, I'm going to do some drawings for Visit Dunfermline. Toby Patterson's public art. He came and done some art, and some of it was really nice. This one's really good. I really like this. This is inspired by the water towers on Commercial Primary School. That's where my kids go. He made bird baths. But somebody wrote fuck on it, and I thought, oh, that's ridiculous. That's brilliant. So I just highlighted that. And just shows you, when you make these things, they're precious and it doesn't work. Now, Zeds. Everybody's using Zeds at the ends of their shop names, but this is the best one. That's real. That's in Brucefield. Get your tackle out in there. I absolutely love that. That's just, I can't explain how good that is. Craig Luscott, top of the town, absolutely beautiful place. That's my kids, that's the new bridge. I think that gets, oh shit, that gets called the Preacher's Stone, I think. It's got a seat in it, and these are folk I imagine preaching at that stone. I don't know if Jim Leishman would get up there, I don't know if he'd fit his arse in that seat. No, I think so, it's a great place. Now there's another stone. This is when we cleared the salon out on the weekend with Johnny the DJ for Wellwood and I had fake Rock. That's Natalie Rock, she works with us, her name's Rock, so we put her in the show. Natalie's here, she took a photo. And so that's the salon sort of transformed, no seats, no sink, no nothing, just people in a party. I think a couple of folk were at it and know what we do with the shop. The Ambition statue, a lot of folk from Dunfermline know that. I've followed it on its travels round the Dunf. It's been up the BLCC, you know, you have your weddings and your Christmas parties. But it's now in the glass houses, the greenhouses at the Glen, behind a bench. So if you ever go in, you'll see it in there. The cemetery. It's the Stirling Cemetery. I did a project about it last year. That's unbelievable. But he died, at 10-year-old, he died of a gunshot wound. Do you know, so there's something amazing about that. You know, it's like, little Willie did, come on, go to Master Bates for your fish. You know, and I did a lot of drawings about receptacles. Amazon. I did a drawing at Amazon. I go past it on the M98 and I just wonder, I always wonder about Amazon. And is it not just a huge Sports Direct kind of setup, what's going on? So I like to just play with images and concepts of the town. Julia Park, woman hoover in the monoblock. Fucking brilliant. I love her. That's for real. That's keeping your architecture tidy. Yeah, someone told me, I was like, holy shit, I've got to get down there and get that photograph. So, great. That building, I think that featured on a Premier Street thing. That's Johnson's disco. But I think it was maybe a Young Women's Institute at one point. Someone that knows will say. But I did all my growing up in the discos of Johnson's and hung about all the kind of soccer casuals. And so I did quite a lot of drawings about them. Right, toilets. I think Toby Patterson maybe touched upon the toilets as well in this project. But what I liked is the two let signs. It's like toilet but without the eye. And my memory of that street is once I was walking along it to go to a shop called First Class and I saw a sparrowhawk chase a pigeon right up the street, and there was all these shoppers with their heads down and a sparrowhawk was flying up the street. I loved it. Raffles Bar, that's my favourite pub in Dunfermline. That's me cutting the manageress's hair on the karaoke stage. They have a film club once a month on a Sunday. They pin a bed sheet to the ceiling and they project a movie on there once a month. So if you want a bit of culture at Raffles, get yourself down there. Now, this is not a day of architecture, but look at that vest. That had swanky on it. This woman, I cut her hair and she told me she wore that to a high-powered NHS meeting and she wore a blazer over the top of it and the place collapsed. She was trying to make important points about the future of the NHS and that's what she kindly wore it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Alan. Brilliant. So architecture is not just about grand buildings. Our next speaker is Lesley Botten, and she's going to talk about the exciting new museum in Dunfermline. She's the display, design and activities curator of Dunfermline Carnegie Library and Galleries. Wow, what a job title. So we're all really looking forward to hearing about the museum.
Well, thank you, Alan, for making my job so much easier. I was at a public meeting when this visualisation of the new building provoked a slightly hostile question from the floor. Why can't you build something in keeping with the historic buildings in the Heritage Quarter? The architect answered in part by saying, let's build something of our own time. And then he asked a question himself. He said, which of the existing buildings would you match it to? On the left here we have the existing Carnegie Library with its amazing Gothic entrance and French chateau-style roof. We've talked about Abbot House a lot. The new build, by the way, is shown by the yellow and buff colour. Coming down to street level, the bank building has a fantastical facade with Dutch gables, classical porticos and astonishing chimneys of Victorian creation. The interior has been demolished so that the new building slots in behind the facade, and so that then maintains the historic streetscape of Abbott Street. Inside the new building, the architects answered the challenge of getting natural light into the centre by having a glass roof that runs the whole depth of the building from north to south above the main circulation zone. They call it the street, and I think that's an interesting thing that they use an outside word for the inside. The street device also allows minimal interference with the original outside wall of the Grade B listed library shown here on the left. The bridges across the street break through in existing windows to limit the alterations needed, and I think also the views inside the building will help people to navigate around it. The rusted core 10 steel panels make a bridge between the historic stonework on the left and the glass, steel and new sandstone on the right. This building is all about bringing Dunfermline's built heritage inside the new building by providing frequent and stunning views outwards. One of the views is to Abbot House, about which we've said a lot. It was a survivor of the Great Fire of Dunfermline. It was always integral to the planning of the new museum, and we hope that the Carnegie Dunfermline Trust will find a way to get it open again. And you see the gate there into the graveyard. That's one of the ways that we hope to create circulation around the site. You're now back inside the new building, looking out towards Abbot House across what will be a new landscape space. I'm going to pause there just so I can unstick my lips. One of the things I think we underestimate is the value of the graveyard, what it brings to the Heritage Quarter. The Abbey Graveyard Survey Group are researching the stories of people buried here, but even without those stories, I think it provides an open and tranquil space at the heart of the Heritage Quarter. The large viewing window at the southwest corner of the top floor of the museum, thank you, mostly looks out across the graveyard, but you also will get a good view of the east end of the Abbey Church and St Margaret's Shrine. There's not much of her shrine left, but it is still a place of pilgrimage, and once the scaffolding's down, that's the view that you'll get looking out from the museum. Behind you in the museum, you have the opportunity to meet 5 of Scotland's kings and queens, who have very strong associations with Dunfermline. St Margaret is joined by her son King David, by Queen Anne of Denmark and King Charles I, as well as Robert the Bruce, who mentions that his name is carved in stone atop the Abbey Church Tower, and reminds us that Dunfermline was the royal burial place for kings and queens of Scotland. Looking at this lovely Victorian photograph, should we have designed the new museum to match the nave or the Abbey Church, perhaps? Some architectural fragments have made their way into the museum collection. We have 9 full-length cartoons, of which these are details for a window in Dunfermline Abbey, which David spoke about, your first speaker. So these cartoons were the blueprints used by the window makers, Ballantynes of Edinburgh. And we've chosen 4 of the faces from those cartoons to be reproduced. And if you were paying attention earlier, you'll know that that one is possibly one of the McLaren brothers. And the one on the right is alleged to be a self-portrait of the artist. So you've seen this slide already. If you haven't actually gone to look at the window, I would urge you to go and look at it. It is absolutely beautiful, and the colours are fantastic. So here we have front of the Carnegie Bars. On the extreme right and left are 2 bronze plaques commissioned from the English artist Richard Goulden by the Carnegie Dunfermline Trust. So Richard Goulden also sculpted Andrew Carnegie and the Ambition statue. And this group of work by this artist forms a unique group in Scotland. The museum has the original plaster maquettes, which I don't have a photograph of, and these are the things that were sent to the foundry to make these bronze panels. We're going to put the maquettes on permanent display in the new building, and I hope people will come to appreciate the bronzes, because I think these are kind of hidden in plain sight. This is, on your left, is the original painting by Kenneth Steele. He was commissioned to do the painting to make the railway poster, advertising Dunfermline as a destination. And I think now that Pittencrieff Park's been tidied up, you can actually see this view again. And this is the image that will greet you as you come into the museum. And lastly, a large painted window from a demolished business which was on the corner of Abbott Street. Fraser and Carmichael sounds like the kind of emporium that I'd like to have visited. They sold things in bulk, from tallow from miners' lamps to beer and pickaxe handles. And it's an example of how fragments end up in museums. And let's not forget the interior of the existing Carnegie Library. This is from before we moved out, but the essential qualities will remain. It will continue to be the adult lending area, and tempus is fugiting, time is flying. So it's always a good idea to acknowledge where the money comes from. The bulk of the funding comes from Fife Council's capital plan, just over a quarter from the Heritage Lottery Fund, and a substantial contribution from the Carnegie Dunfermline Trust. Now, where does Fife Cultural Trust come in? Well, we hope that Dunfermline Carnegie Library and Galleries will be operated by us on behalf of Fife Council.
Thanks, Lesley. The museum looks amazing. Very excited about it. I'm going to hand over to Gillian soon, but we will be speakers will all be kind of at the bar or milling around, so you can ask questions of the speakers after. But in the meantime, I'd like it if you could show your appreciation for all the speakers tonight and give them a round of applause.
So as Jane was saying, I'd just like to thank all the speakers for their inspirational stories. And I would also like to thank Jane and Michelle for curating this event. It's been fantastic, I'm sure you'll agree. And as we were saying, if you'd like to follow up with any of tonight's presenters, the venue in the bar will be open for the next half hour. So please feel free to stay and to network. Otherwise, we've left some details on the tables with contacts for the people who were presenting if you'd like to make contact with them again. Our next Pecha Kucha event will take place in November, and this event is going to be curated by Grieve, so you heard from tonight. It's going to be very entertaining. Alan's telling me that it's going to contain some music, some drama, and there will be presentations from some really interesting characters within the time, so it's one definitely not to be missed. So thank you for coming. And just before I go, can I just give a wee plug for our Fife Cultural Trust's Kirkcaldy Film Festival, which is on the Adam Smith Theatre from the 14th to the 18th of September. There's little brochures which are around on tables if you'd like to pick one up. Thank you very much.
Fiona,